The next part we're going to dive into here is how deer use these terrain features. We're going to go to an old place that I hunted down in West Virginia called Cooper's Rock State Forest. When you think of terrain, or at least this is how I think of terrain and how deer use terrain, they really only use it for three features, or three things. And that's going to be food, bedding, and basically security cover. I marked off this piece of Cooper's Rock that I used to hunt. And you have this main access road coming in through here. I try to stick anywhere from a quarter to a half a mile away from most access points, unless there's some really, really good overlooked areas. But if you look here, most of this stuff is far away. And I'm going to start explaining these pieces that we got in here. We're going to start with bedding locations. I'm sure most of you guys have heard of Dan Infalt. If you not, he pretty much coined like the hunting of buck beds. The tricky part for new people is being able to locate them. They say the 1/3, they say points, they say this, they say that. There's no set formula per se to finding beds. You kind of have to add all the things together and then figure out what the deer like in your area that has that habitat feature, if that makes sense. So down here, where I was at in West Virginia, they love these little points of beds, or these little points of benches on really steep terrain. So here you have 100-foot elevation gain, 100-foot elevation gain, and then real tiny flat bench. This is 80 feet wide. I can almost guarantee that a buck's going to be bedding on that point. There's going to be, I can almost guarantee that this is either primary and this might be secondary or vice versa, but I can almost guarantee that a buck's going to bed on that section. Here's why. The Cheat River is a huge, huge river. So it's not necessarily going to stay cold like those mountain streams. It will heat up. So it's not going to quite have that same thermal effect as those colder mountain streams. So you will get thermals pushing up the mountain as this valley bottom heats up. Now let's say you're getting a northeast wind, which is going to be this direction. This buck can bed on that little bench, smell everything and see everything below him. And then with the wind coming this way, he's going to be able to smell anything that's potentially behind him. And it's super steep. I mean, it's a triple whammy, and this area is where they're bedding is pretty much, they're unkillable. If you try to sneak in here through this little draw, you might be able to get out here and then hope that they come out the sides, which is possible. You can potentially sneak up this little draw if you're quiet enough and get on the same level of them and hope that they sneak out that way. But I'm going to show you here in a little second which might be a better option for you. So we're going to go over here, check out these beds. It's the same deal. Points, 1/3 of the way down from the top. You're going to get thermals coming up from the top, or I'm sorry, from the bottom. Northeast wind, northwest wind, pretty much unkillable. And they're almost all these beds are like that. Now, once you get back into here, here's where it kind of gets a little different. These are what I would call kill beds. This one's going to be your primary bedding. More than likely, a buck is only going to bed on this point when you have a northeast or a west wind. Directions going this way, thermals coming up the hill. What he's going to do is he's most likely going to exit out this way. Very seldomly do they exit out going with their wind at the back. This is going to be your secondary bedding location. These are where you're going to find like your 2.5, 3.5-year-old bucks. And then this is more likely where you're going to find your 4s and up. So we're moving back over to our really hot beds, the ones that we really want to try to figure out. You switch it over to aerial, and you can see here I have this marked. This is where you finally have some variation in the habitat. Deer are edge creatures. They always flock to some type of edge or some type of transition over from a monogamous habitat to a more diverse habitat. Here's going to be your first one that you're going to find before you get to this big one. Now, these bucks might not be getting to this big change out here where they're going to be feeding all night long and then come back here to bed. This might be your staging area. Somewhere in here between this staging area where they'll go right before it gets dark is where you want to try to set up for them. I'm going to ask you guys a question. What's the issue of trying to put a stand in this location? Does anybody know?
Hey, you might jump them too early.
Why might you jump them too early?
If you said that if they're probably feeding over to where you had it marked and they were coming over here to bed down, if you're right there and you catch them, I guess like when they're still bedded, is it just too early to get that close to the bed or?
Say it's your thermals.
Exactly. Wayne hit it pretty much right on the head. The thermals are going to change when these bucks are getting ready to get out of bed. The wind direction is going to be going, the thermal direction, I should say, is going to be going this way, right at them.
Oh, okay.
So now your scent is right in their nose, and you blew up this whole bedding area. So where would you put a stand in there in that situation, Wayne, if you were going to hunt that? Give me a stand selection potentially for a morning hunt and an evening hunt.
Well, in the morning, typically your thermals are going to rise. So that's the hard part. If he's coming from a staging back to the bed, it's still hard to get between that because your wind's still going to be bad for in the mornings. So I honestly don't know. I just know that it's hard. It's a hard deer to hunt. Is what it is.
And that's why that bedding's so good. Like I said earlier, they're almost unkillable. What I have found, especially on these changes of habitat diversity, here you have almost all mature canopy. And what you can do is you can get real tight to this stuff, hunt low, and the thermals will actually pull down this pipeline or power line or whatever that is, gas line. If you get into the woods too far, it's pulling right down into them. You got to hang back. That's where it's like you kind of are taking a shot in the wind. Maybe they're still not getting there. You might have to put 3 sits in there and then be like, I'm too far away from the bed. They're still not getting to me in daylight. But that's what I would consider the answer to be, or that's at least how I would hunt this situation. I would get right on that power line so that my thermals are pulling this direction.
I would also try to understand what they planted there when they came and restored the pipeline right away, knowing that it's on public property and they probably worked with West Virginia DNR as they built this pipeline. A lot of times they'll have a seed mixture that deer want to eat. They could very well be just sitting down in there till it's dark and then coming out onto that pipeline right away and feeding there.
Yep. Here is also, I have 2 points for this particular location. You're probably going to find doe bedding somewhere up in here, up on this knob ridge, or potentially over in here. This may be a location that you don't hunt in early season, that you only go in there during the pre-rut when the bucks are starting to get up a little bit early, or even maybe during the middle of the day and nose and does around. Let's switch back over to Topo, and we talked about saddles, right? All this is super steep. They don't necessarily want to walk on it unless they get on. They might walk on this little bench here, but you have a high point here, and then here's your pinch point. This is where I'm setting up to kill these bucks, is right here. If you have an evening hunt, your wind's going to go down this direction, and hopefully they're going to hook in here, follow this travel path, check out this potential doe bedding area here, and then hook up into the better feed for the evening.